Okay, today I'm going to be going over some of the settings for the interface as well as helping you get your files set up. Now, the very first time you open Blender, you will have a splash screen that looks a little bit different from this. Unless you have been a frequent user of Blender to where you have settings that you really want to save, you don't even have to worry about that. Just click anywhere, it will get rid of it. From then on out, when you open Blender, but okay, let me backtrack here. This time, you don't need to worry about it. Later on, when you have updates or something like that, you will want to make sure that you tell it to load the settings from your previous use. Or you will have to redo all of this each time you update. But for now, you don't need to worry about it. And then from now on, when you open Blender, you will have a splash screen like what I have up here, on which you see it has new file information, recent files, and open. The open will take you to your blend files that aren't listed in your recent. Now, for right this minute, you can just click anywhere on your screen, left mouse click that is, or click where it says General. Now you will see here, this is our default. We have the cube, the light, and the camera. We'll be getting rid of those before we get started here, but for right this minute, I'm going to turn on my screencast keys so that you can follow along. And I'm sorry, I am almost blind too, so, well, okay, I'm not almost blind. I need glasses anymore for certain things, so I just turn my size up on stuff. Yeah, it helps if I actually check the button there. Okay. Now, we are going to come through here, and the very first thing we're going to look at is our preferences. So if you go up here to where it says Edit, and come down Preferences, the very first one here, under Interface. Now, as I was saying, with my vision like it is, I always make the sizing a little bit bigger so it's easier for me to read. So I turn the UI scale up to 1.2. That's just the default for me. It makes things a little bit easier, and as you can see, yes, some things moved around slightly. It hasn't been a problem because we can maneuver, but it makes it bigger, so easier to read. Now the next thing here we're going to come to is going to be our input. Now if you're on a laptop, chances are good that you do not have a number pad. And while a number pad is very helpful, you can use the emulate number pad on the keyboard in input. Now the next one here, emulate 3-button mouse. Okay, I know some people use that. I'll tell you though, quite truthfully, you're not going to be as relaxed using Blender without a 3-button mouse. There's lots of things that will be a lot harder to do, and to be perfectly truthful, I can't offer answers on how to do it without a 3-button mouse. Now, our next off one here is navigate. This zoom to mouse position, we're going to be turning that on, but I'm going to show you first why we want it. Let me go through and make sure those others are saved. I actually don't necessarily trust the autosave and like to click it myself, which is why I just did that. Okay, close this. Now let me come here. I'm going to duplicate this cube. And I'm just going to grab it and move it, say over here. Now right now my emulate mouse, or my zoom to mouse position is not on. So as you can see, it doesn't matter where I put my mouse on the screen, it stays to one spot that it zooms in and out of. Now coming back here, clicking the zoom to mouse position, saving my preferences. Now my screen changes to wherever I have my mouse. That's what's going to be zoomed in. Makes it much easier while you're trying to maneuver around a mesh. So you definitely want to make sure you do those. And we're going to go back to options here. Now there is one add-on that is an absolute must. And that is Node Wrangler. Now, if you notice, when you just type in Node up here, you get a few default options here, but Node Wrangler is the one we want. Why it does not come automatically turned on, I do not know, because it is probably one of the most used add-ons, plugins, whatever you want to call it, by the entire Blender community, not just Blender for SL. Make sure you save your preferences. And I'm going to delete this one first, as it wasn't even part of the default. Now, these three right here, well, before we delete them, I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the things here. As you can see right here, it says object mode. You cannot change. Okay, you can make some changes like to the scale or the location of an item, because like I can come here, click my S for scale, scale it up, scale it down. I can click my G and move it. But I can't just grab like one corner and move it out. Well, that's where we also have edit mode. Now if you look here, you'll see object, edit, sculpt, vertex paint, weight paint, and texture paint all right here. For now, the only ones we are going to be worried about is object mode and edit mode. Now there's two ways that you can change between them. One is by using the drop down menu here and just going like that. The other is quite simply hitting your tab key. Now if you have more than one mesh item out here that are their own separate objects, you do definitely want to make sure you are clicked on the right one. So that's that. And if you notice, our tools change here depending on the mode that we're in. Because this will wind up giving us a lot more, and I'll be honest with you, many of these you won't use for a while. Some of them you may never use, but many of them will be a later on thing. Now, that's layout. This is the modeling. The modeling and the layout windows are pretty much interchangeable. The biggest difference is the default state for the modeling is edit mode. The default state for the layout is object mode. That's it. You can do everything in both windows that you would do in the other one. So if it can be done in object or in layout, it can be done in modeling and vice versa. Now sculpting is a different bit. And it's not something we will touch on right away because there is an awful lot to it. But these are your brushes. This talks about your radius, your strength, and stuff like that. Now your UV editing mode. Every mesh has a UV map. The UV editing tab is where we go through and we unwrap the object, which the object has to be in edit mode, and you have to select all the vertex for it to show. Now, as you can see here, it gave us a default map of the cube. There are ways that we can change that, which we'll get into as we start doing more with the mapping. Texture paint, I'll be truthful, I don't use often, if ever. Shading is our #1 tab for working with our textures or our procedural textures. Animation, we won't be doing anything with that in this bit, at least for now. I'll be honest with you, I have not had a reason to use this. Rendering, that's for when you want to do a render of your current project or when you are doing a shadow cat. Oh, okay, that'll be the render for the current project. The compost is your composition, excuse me, will be where you make your, where you take your shadow catcher texture and actually turn it into an alpha, which is something we'll get into. The geometry nodes is new, so I haven't started playing with that yet. And then, of course, scripting is not something that we will be touching on yet in here. Most of this has absolutely nothing to do with SL, but there are things that can be done in the scripting part that, while it's not for SL, can help you with the modeling aspect before you get it ready for export. So let me come back here to layout. Now another thing that over here on your right side of the screen, we have our editor type and properties. This camera looking icon is your render properties. Now whatever we set right now we can save as our startup default. Where it says Eevee here, I want you to go ahead and select cycles and GPU. We're going to come down here to bake, and where it says 16 pixels and for the margin here, go ahead and change that to 10. It will just make it so much easier later on, and will help you not have to think about, oh, did I change that before we get started. So now we're going to go through here and we're going to delete the light, the camera, and the cube from the default startup. To delete them, Just right click on one of them, or excuse me, left click on one of them, hold down your shift key, and left click on the other two. Then hit your X key for delete and click OK. Now with all those changes made, we're going to come back here to our defaults, or file, defaults, save startup file. That way, the next time you open Blender, all of these changes will already be made. And I'm going to end the first video here.